It was 35 years ago this week that the United States left Vietnam. Now some Vietnamese Americans are making a return. We have a report from special correspondent Fred de Sam Lazaro.
From his office, software entrepreneur Victor Liu has a view of the Saigon airport, a daily reminder of how he escaped from his native country at the end of the Vietnam War.
There are two active runways, okay? And you see next to those hangars, there's a taxiway. I took up from that taxiway.
On April 28, 1975, 23-year-old Liu was in the scramble to evacuate on the last remaining American military aircraft hours before North Vietnamese soldiers took the city and unified a divided nation into the Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
So the pilot had to zigzag and to take off.
Like tens of thousands of Vietnamese loyal to the American-backed South who fled after the war ended, Victor Liu became a refugee in America. He never dreamed he'd be back so soon, he says, but the Soviet Union collapsed and the internet began shrinking the world.
The third thing is Vietnam opened up and joined the WTO.
Vietnam's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2007 capped a 15-year transition from a Soviet-style socialized economy. It sparked robust growth, over 7% for several years, until the global recession in 2009. Liu got a 6-year tax break from the Vietnamese government to move some of his California-based business here. He found a wealth of capable, educated workers who adapted quickly to a capitalist global system.
They are very quick learner, and they have a lot of this a PhD that went to Russia and studied and came back with a very high degree in math, artificial intelligence, and these are the people that end up in our company.
One floor down from Liu's office, in another Vietnamese American-owned firm, 100 video game artists and engineers program games that will soon show up on American and European store shelves. The workers are a post-war generation.
Most of our people here, that the average age was born after 1975, have no idea about the conflict.
Those who do have an idea about the conflict, the victorious communist-led government used to brand people who left as traitors. But today, those who return are welcomed back, many as investors. Andrew Lam was 11 when he left with his family in 1975. He's now a San Francisco-based journalist and author of a book on the overseas Vietnamese experience.
The people who belong to so-called the losing side are connected internationally. You know, uncle will send money home and the son will start a little shop. If he's good, it might turn into a chain, especially when Vietnam was very impoverished. You know, there's been estimating which, you know, Vietnamese overseas sends back money that was at one point considered about 16% of the GNP.
Overseas Vietnamese may be welcomed for their business acumen and American education, but Vietnam remains a tightly controlled society, with reminders everywhere that the Communist Party remains all-powerful. Huynh Qui Duc, from a prominent South Vietnamese family, fled when he was 17. He became a journalist and had come back over the years to report from Vietnam. But when he decided to move here permanently 3 years ago, he discovered what he calls extreme suspicion.
I never got a journalist visa. They assume that you must work for a spy agency if you speak English, and because I speak other languages, I've lived overseas in many parts of the world.
Huynh decided to stay on anyway. Like an estimated 3,000 other overseas Vietnamese, he opened a business. Huynh opened a bar in Hanoi, a venue for music and book readings, a hangout for many Vietnamese Americans.
But you were born in the States, right? I was born in the States.
Benny Tran works here for the Clinton Foundation on HIV issues. His brother, Ben, is a college professor in Tennessee and a frequent visitor.
The irony is that we know Vietnam better than our parents.
Why? Because they've been back for 35 years.
We were the current Vietnam. I mean, they're actually right now as we speak, we sit here, they're on a tour of northern Vietnam. They've never
been back before.
They've never been outside of Saigon.
My parents' generation, they just don't want to have anything to do with this regime and this government, and they always discourage their children from participating in returning. And yet I see that it's their children who return and become very active in playing a central role in changing Vietnam.
Yet there's growing concern that much of the economic change, the business investment, is taking place in big cities and creating an elite increasingly removed from the rural areas where 70% of the population lives. It's in those rural areas that social entrepreneur Jeep Vuong found her calling. She's trying to protect young women from being sold into prostitution. Although the poverty rate has dropped significantly to 12%, Vietnam remains a major source of women trafficked into the sex trade in Southeast Asia. Vuong started a foundation to educate women like these to make them less vulnerable to traffickers. This group is among 25 who've been housed and trained in culinary school in Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon. And near Vietnam's border with Cambodia, Vuong's staff runs a shelter and provides hundreds of scholarships to keep girls in school. They also watch out for families in crisis that might be exploited. The day we visited, Vuong dropped by the home of one scholarship recipient, 14-year-old Nhu Huynh, and her 6-year-old sister Nhan, who live with their elderly grandparents. These girls' widowed mother works in a factory in the city. She's away most of the year, a common occurrence in poor rural households. Vuong is worried that these girls have been going to see their mother during the school holidays.
There are lots of kidnappings there. You cannot let them go to the city.
The mother, being 36, may be not at risk, but the little girl going to Saigon where the mother has no time to take care of her will be at extreme risk.
Of being kidnapped and trafficked?
Of being kidnapped, being tricked, and trafficked. Yeah.
She warned the grandparents of the dangers and is trying to find a way to bring the girl's mother home more often. Vuong raises most of the money to support her foundation in the United States, where she landed as a high school kid in 1980, fleeing Vietnam with her family on a boat.
I did relatively well in school and whatnot, and I realized that few months of sleeplessness was enough for me to want to do something.
A good student from a well-to-do family, Vuong went on to a Harvard education and a prosperous career in Silicon Valley with her husband. She considers herself American, but has a strong tug to Vietnam.
I always remember my mother saying to us that we were born Vietnamese for a reason, and it's up to us to figure out what that reason is.
Huynh plans to stay in Vietnam and in his own small way says he pushes for more open exchanges of political ideas, something that he says has attracted the attention of authorities.
I have people coming in here ranging from the diplomatic community. Ambassadors come into here. I've had people work on human rights issues come in here, so they give me a bit of extra attention. I live with that, and I don't let it bother me too much. But I think I am pushing some envelopes. I am talking about issues that are generally not talked about, like human rights, like democracy.
Software entrepreneur Liu stays at arm's length from such issues, but he hears other people wondering what path Vietnam should take.
People around here also look at a place like Thailand and say, well, they have democracy. It's a big mess. That is something that the next generation have to define it.
Journalist Lam worries that the only ideology being offered the new generation is that making money is what it's all about.
I think that for a country that is ruled by materialism, it inevitably loses its moral compass. And Vietnam has always been a spiritual country. This is how they fought against the French, the Chinese. It's a kind of sacrifice for the greater good. And that has completely disappeared.
On Vietnam streets, the communist-era slogans continue to praise workers and peasants, signature of the party elders still in charge, the last generation with ties to the war. But the clearest message from Vietnam today seems to be open for business.